On the morning of February 27th, 2026, one day before the bombs fell, a senior diplomat stood before cameras and made a statement the world should have heard. He said peace was within reach. He said Iran had agreed to something no country had ever agreed to before. Iran would never stockpile enriched uranium. Not a limit, not a cap. Zero stockpiling. Forever, with full UN verification. He called it, and these are his exact words, a breakthrough that has never been achieved any time before. The next morning, the United States and Israel launched one of the largest military operations of the 21st century. No peace deal was signed, no final round of talks was held. The next scheduled technical meeting in Vienna on March 2nd never happened. So here is the question that every person watching this war should be asking. If Iran had agreed to the core demand, no nuclear bomb ever, why did this war start anyway? By the end of this video, you will understand three things that mainstream coverage has not put together. First, exactly what Iran agreed to on February 26th and 27, and why the mediator called it historic. Second, why the U.S. envoy dismissed Iran's proposal, what he got wrong, and what the arms control experts say about that decision. Third, what this untold backstory means for every peace negotiation happening right now, and why it explains Iran's current refusal to trust Washington. Stay with me. Let us start from the beginning, simply. Since 2018, the United States and Iran have been locked in a nuclear standoff. The original 2015 nuclear agreement, which limited Iran's enrichment in exchange for sanctions relief, collapsed when the U.S. withdrew from it unilaterally. After that, Iran began enriching uranium at increasingly higher levels. By early 2026, Iran was enriching to 60% purity. Weapons grade is 90%. Iran was not there, but it was closer than any non-nuclear state had ever been. This created the crisis. The U.S. and Israel feared Iran was weeks or months from the ability to build a nuclear weapon. Iran said it had no intention of building one. In February 2026, a new round of negotiations began. 3 rounds of indirect talks in Oman and Geneva took place over 3 weeks. Iran and the U.S. never spoke face-to-face. Oman's foreign minister carried the messages between rooms. On February 26th, the third and final round concluded in Geneva. Both sides agreed to meet again, at a technical level, in Vienna on March 2nd. On February 27th, the Omani foreign minister declared a breakthrough. He said Iran had agreed to zero stockpiling of enriched uranium and full IAEA access, permanently. On February 28th, the strikes began. But here is where it gets complicated. Here is what Iran actually agreed to in Geneva, on the record, verified by the mediator himself. Iran agreed that it would never stockpile enriched uranium at any level sufficient to create a nuclear weapon. This is called zero stockpiling. It means whatever uranium Iran enriches must be immediately converted to fuel. It cannot be saved. It cannot be accumulated. Iran agreed to full and comprehensive verification by the International Atomic Energy Agency. This means surprise inspections. It means access to any declared, and potentially undeclared, nuclear sites. Iran agreed to irreversibly downgrade its existing enriched uranium stockpiles to the lowest possible level. The material would be converted into fuel, a process that cannot be undone. The mediator said this had never been achieved before, not in the 2015 deal, not in any previous negotiation. Zero stockpiling is considered by non-proliferation experts to be the single most effective barrier to a country ever building a nuclear bomb. If you cannot accumulate enriched material, you cannot build a weapon. These were not promises. These were agreed positions, confirmed by the mediating foreign minister who was in the room. The next day, February 27th, the same mediator went on American television. He said the deal was within reach. He said Iran was open to discussing other issues beyond nuclear matters. He said he believed all remaining questions could be resolved amicably within a few months. He also said, on that same day, that he did not think any alternative to diplomacy would solve this problem. On February 28th, the alternative to diplomacy began, and what happened inside the U.S. delegation in those final hours, that is where this story becomes even more disturbing. Coming up next. So why did the war start the day after a breakthrough was declared? Several factors are now on record, and they paint a complicated picture. First, Trump's public statement. On the same day the mediator declared a breakthrough, Trump told reporters he was not happy with the talks. He said he was not happy with the way they are negotiating. He did not explain what that meant, but that statement, on February 27th, signaled that the diplomatic window may have already closed in Washington before the talks in Geneva concluded. Second, the U.S. envoy's assessment of Iran's nuclear proposal. Analysts with direct knowledge of the negotiations have documented that the U.S. special envoy misread a key element of Iran's technical proposal. Iran had offered an enrichment framework based on the needs of its Tehran research reactor, a civilian medical reactor. The envoy concluded, incorrectly, that Iran's proposal was designed to secretly accumulate enriched material. Non-proliferation experts reviewed the same proposal and said that conclusion was unfounded. Analysts suggest the envoy's misreading of Iran's technical offer negatively shaped Washington's final assessment of whether a deal was achievable. Third, the timeline of military preparation. While the Geneva talks were ongoing, U.S. warships and submarines were already moving into position. Intelligence reporting suggests the military operation had been planned and ordered before the third round of talks concluded. Analysts suggest the talks may have continued, almost at least in part, to provide cover while the military deployment was completed. Fourth, Trump's stated decision. After the war began, Trump acknowledged that by the time the third round of talks ended in Geneva, he had likely already made the decision to go to war. The Omani foreign minister said after the strikes that he was dismayed. He said that active and serious negotiations had been undermined. And this is precisely why Iran's current negotiating posture is what it is. That context is essential, and we are going to explain it now. Iran watched a breakthrough get announced. Iran watched the next scheduled meeting get canceled. Iran watched the bombs fall while its diplomats were still in Geneva. Analysts suggest this experience is now the foundational reality behind every Iranian position in current negotiations. When Iran publicly rejects U.S. proposals, when its foreign minister says our policy is resistance, that is not simply posturing. It is a documented response to a specific sequence of events. Iran agreed to the core demand. The core demand was not enough to stop the war. This creates a structural problem for any current negotiation. For Iran to engage seriously in the back channel now running through Pakistan, it needs something the U.S. has not yet offered, a credible guarantee that any agreement will hold. Iran has watched one deal collapse in 2018 when the U.S. withdrew unilaterally. It watched a potential second deal dissolve into military strikes in 2026. Analysts suggest Iran's 5-point counterproposal, currently on the table, is deliberately maximalist because Iran expects the U.S. to negotiate downward. Iran is not offering its real floor. It is offering a ceiling. The real negotiation has not yet begun. If the Pakistan back channel produces any movement, analysts suggest the first visible sign will not be a ceasefire announcement. It will be a quiet, undeclared reduction in strike frequency. A technical pause, something deniable by both sides. If it does not produce movement, and if the April 6th deadline triggers U.S. strikes on Iranian energy infrastructure, analysts warn that Iran's incentive to ever negotiate again collapses entirely, and the Strait of Hormuz becomes a permanent feature of global instability for years. The pre-war deal that nobody told you about is now the lens through which every current development must be read. Let us connect this to something you feel directly. The 2015 nuclear deal, which Iran complied with fully for 3 years, kept oil markets stable, kept shipping lanes open, and kept Iranian nuclear material under international supervision. When that deal collapsed in 2018, oil prices rose, regional tensions escalated, and the path to this war began. The pre-war February 2026 agreement, had it been signed, would have been more comprehensive than the 2015 deal. Zero stockpiling is stronger than enrichment caps. Full IAEA access is broader than scheduled inspections. If that deal had held, the Strait of Hormuz would be open today. 2,000 ships would not be stranded. 20,000 sailors would not be waiting for a war to end. Goldman Sachs would not be projecting elevated oil prices through 2027. For Pakistan, and for South Asia broadly, this history matters in a specific way. Pakistan is now carrying messages between Washington and Tehran. Pakistan's credibility as a mediator depends on both sides believing that any agreement it helps broker will actually hold. The February 2026 precedent, where a breakthrough was followed immediately by military strikes, is the single biggest obstacle to Pakistan's diplomatic mission right now. For any deal to succeed through the Pakistan back channel, Washington will need to offer Iran something it has never offered before: a binding, verifiable commitment that the agreement will not be abandoned unilaterally. Without that, Iran has every documented reason to believe that signing anything is a strategic risk, not a diplomatic victory. That is the hidden weight behind every conversation happening in Islamabad right now. Based on everything we have covered, here is my assessment. The war that is now in its 28th day was not inevitable. The evidence on record, from the mediator who was in the room, from non-proliferation experts who reviewed the proposals, from the sequence of events between February 26 and 28, shows that a diplomatic path existed. Whether that path was deliberately closed, or whether it collapsed under the weight of miscommunication, mistrust, and military momentum, that is a question historians will debate for decades. And what matters now is this: the same conditions that made February 2026 a near breakthrough still exist. Iran does not want a nuclear bomb. Its own foreign minister has said this publicly and repeatedly. The U.S. does not want a permanently destabilized Middle East. Its own economists are documenting the cost of that instability in real time. My prediction: a formal ceasefire agreement, if it comes, will not look like a U.S. victory or an Iranian surrender. It will look like a technical arrangement, a framework built on the February 26th agreements that were never signed. The zero stockpiling breakthrough will be quietly revived, and it will be presented by both sides as something new, the one thing that changes this entirely: a U.S. ground deployment into Iranian territory. If that happens, the February 2026 diplomatic record becomes irrelevant. A new and far more dangerous phase begins. That is the line neither side should cross. And both sides know exactly where it is. We started with a question. If Iran had agreed to the core demand, no nuclear bomb, ever, why did this war start anyway? Here is the honest answer. Because a diplomatic breakthrough and a political decision to go to war existed simultaneously, in the same week, in the same city, between the same governments. One of those two things won. And the world has been paying the price every day since February 28th. The deal was there, the mediator saw it, the diplomats were scheduled to return, and then they were not. That is not analysis. That is the documented record. And it is the most important context for understanding everything happening in this war right now. If this video gave you clarity that mainstream coverage didn't, subscribe. Next analysis drops in 3 days.